Hi, everyone, and welcome to the weekly Venting with Ginnie and Barry. I'm Ginnie Graham. I'm the editorials editor of the Tulsa World Opinion section, here with my friend Barry.
Who's a writer, comedian, has his own blog, and just had his air conditioner fixed, most importantly.
He's very broke with the new air conditioning. So if you see Barry around town, buy him a soda.
Just
give him a couple of dollars. The man, I mean, he's very relaxed in his air conditioning, but he's not going anywhere for a while.
Right.
So,
the anxiety's still kicking up. There you go. All right.
So this week, I let Barry choose the topic, and I thought all the cool things going on. What would Barry want to talk about? What did you choose, Barry?
Abortion.
Because you're a fun dinner party guest.
I'm a fun dinner party, and again, if you want to get out of a dinner party early, just mention abortion, maybe school prayer. But abortion really will stop the conversation and ruin any segment of the dinner party. This is the slippery slope, the mother of all slippery slopes. And I think this just encompasses everything that gets us to our corners of the ring. And abortion is pretty much the litmus test. You mentioned it earlier. Ask somebody where they're on abortion, and you pretty much can fill in the rest of the blanks. This, to me, just speaks to what it is that motivates us and what it is we think that motivates other people. You can argue, and I do, this really isn't about the unborn. It's about sex. It's about power. It's about women's rights. And I thought, what better to talk about, especially in light of what happened in Kansas.
You're just diving in. So, this is, and when you told me this, I thought, why would we talk? And I've been almost trained. Why would you talk about this? Because you're not going to change anyone's mind. Because since Roe v. Wade, 50 years now, it has been, there's a group of people that, this is murder. And when a person truly believes something is murder, you're not going to change that position because they believe it's murder. Murder's wrong. But what we're finding, and this is that area that we now have to address, which are the people who identify as pro-life. They're pro-life. They're against this, except, fill in the blank, except for rape, except for incest, except for when the mother is, her health is in danger. So for a lot of people, they're pro-life with a line that can be moved around. So I think the challenge is, where does that line fall for most people? And when I say most people, poll after poll shows, even in Oklahoma, it ranges anywhere from 55% to 60, a little over 60% of people who want it legal in some cases, that they want it as an option.
Right.
So that's where we have to sort of go.
30% of people surveyed by this group called Amber Integrity, Integrated. 30% were in favor of a total abortion ban.
Right.
But 48% of Republicans are in a favor of a total abortion ban. Now, Governor Stitt said, from the moment life begins at conception is when we have a responsibility as human beings to do everything we can, now listen to the language here, to protect that baby's life and the life of the mother. Look who comes first. The mother is now a subordinate clause, almost. That is what I believe, and that is what the majority of Oklahomans believe. That is not what the majority of Oklahomans believe. Only 8% of adults nationwide say abortion should be against the law in all cases. So what exactly are Americans of two positions about this? 92% of Americans believe there should be some exception for abortion.
Yeah, so it's where that line is drawn. And
right.
A lot of it is determining on when life begins, which is a theological question. For some people, it's conception, when the two cells meet. But that's based on faith, not based. Now, Senator Langford argues it's based on science. I inherently disagree. There's no scientists out there saying that. There are some pro-life propaganda out there saying that. But that's where, you're of the Jewish faith. I understand. Where does the Jewish faith believe life begins?
The great rabbis have been talking about this for hundreds of years. And in the Talmud, which is the commentary on the Jewish Bible, There was a number of explanations about when life begins, the first breath, which is not conception. There's some talk about how if the baby, the fetus, again, just the language itself, what are we calling this, presents a threat to the woman, it is to be removed because it is an evil force within the mother who's killing the mother. So there's no great line where every Jew will say, hey, Jews believe in abortion. We don't believe in abortion, but there is some more leeway to what our religious teachings direct us towards than I guess a fundamentalist Christian. Question should be then is, why are we even talking about this? That's not what we base this on. We have a constitution. We do not.
Right.
We do
right.
not,
And it's interesting because the Sarah Weddington, the one who the attorney who led the Roe v. Wade case, mm-hmm. she in later years, because it established this right to privacy, which has been attacked. Now that's been thrown out, and that's what the majority of the Supreme Court, because so many other rights were based on that, from same-sex marriage to contraception, that without that, you don't have those. There's no right to privacy in the Constitution. She would have argued it on a First Amendment right, of religion, that because so much of the argument now for and against abortion is based on religion, that her argument to protect the right would be a freedom of religion, that your faith doesn't dictate what my faith should be, or my lifestyle should not be dictated by someone else's faith.
And if there's a case in Florida right now that's going through the courts, and the problem there is, what if the Supreme Court gets that case and decides, after listening to those arguments, yes, but the Christian faith is going to win out here. And if the Christian faith wins out on this one, then the Christian faith wins out on all of them, yes? And then what do we have?
That would seem to be the case. And that would be the big challenge, wouldn't it?
And that is the ultimate goal. That is the ultimate goal. I'm going to be a cynical and I'll say that is what this is about, is getting to the point where we will have that dynamic in this country. Mm-hmm. Tell me there's a Republican out there, there's a conservative out there who spouses this, whoever says to you or to me or to anyone else, let's find the common ground, right? Let's find that middle area. It doesn't happen because that's not what they're interested in.
Well, it doesn't happen in this space right now. What I'm frustrated by constantly right now is the lack of the moderate voices, because we're hearing a lot on the extremist end. I mean, we're hearing fundamentalist and evangelical Christians talk about, we want a Christian nation. And that's what, and I don't believe all conservatives believe that way, but we're not hearing their voices. We are not hearing from them. And that's what's frustrating. But when we get to abortion, one of the things I wrote about a few times, it was interesting. Every time I wrote about it, inevitably, I'd get the same response. But Oklahoma has been collecting data on the women getting abortions for the last 20 years, detailed, almost intrusive kind of information from not just age but educational data, everything,
situational data.
Yeah, I mean, all of these. And one of the interesting parts of what they ask are reasons. Why are you getting an abortion? And to me, we can't talk about this issue without talking about the reasons why. And
well, you and I can't, but others can. If you believe that life begins at conception, then every other question that follows that is one you're not very interested in.
Right. But here's the thing. You're not going to win those people over. And inevitably, whenever I wrote the story about the reasons why, there would always be a comment or two or a call saying, it doesn't matter. They're murdering children. If that's how you feel, then there's nothing that I can do or say. And that's what I was sort of joking about with you about. In bringing this up, there are just some people that is their belief. But I think if we've got to get to where we talk about why are women seeking, who are they? Because everyone has a stereotype in mind. Everyone has this idea in mind. And I was always fascinated by the idea that 61% of women last year in Oklahoma who got an abortion, they had already given birth before. Of that 61%, 21% had 2 kids. 13% had 3 or more kids. Now, I don't know if their abortions were from they can't have any more, they don't want any more children, or if there was something going wrong with their pregnancy. But other reasons, and one of the things that I quickly learned about looking at these reasons for abortion is that it's so varied, that it just seems like there are so many situations out there, and it's so complicated that it's hard. People, if you have empathy, have to empathize with what these women are facing. And of the hundreds said they were in domestic violence situations. They were in dangerous relationships they were trying to get out of. And then you had others that were a lot about poverty. They could not afford this child. And when you think about, and this was helpful in the way that when we're talking about preventing abortion, when we're talking about, because that's ultimately what, Bill Clinton had said, we wanted to be rare, safe,
legal, rare, and safe, right?
Right. And we're getting there. What's interesting, between 2002 and 2020 in Oklahoma, abortions decreased by half, 50% less. And the big difference came when the Take Control initiative went into place, which gave free birth control to low-income women across the state. And at the same time, Tulsa and Union schools put in real sex ed, like evidence-based, we're going to be real with you, sex ed. Tulsa County's teen pregnancy rate plummeted, abortions plummeted. I mean, there's a direct correlation between that. So this data was helpful in that way. So what I fear in this abortion debate, what comes next? It's going to be birth control.
Well, and that's the case. How can you be for an abortion ban and against birth control? It seems if you want to reduce the need for unwanted pregnancies, you could reduce the need for unwanted pregnancies. So it's not about abortion anymore. If you can prevent the pregnancy from happening, we have no abortion problem.
Right.
Is that not the issue, or is there something else going on? I have some questions, though. Does anyone know a woman who forgoes birth control because she knew that abortion was legal? Does anyone personally know a woman who's had an abortion they would report to authorities? Does anyone feel comfortable in telling a woman she can handle a baby and that woman has 2 or 3 other children? And the other one is, has anyone ever told an 11-year-old rape victim who's pregnant, you have to carry this baby to term because God wants you to? And have you ever told your 11-year-old that, or your best friend's 11-year-old that? This is one of those issues that matter when they matter. And the joke is that for many of these uber-right fundamentalist Christians, there are 3 exceptions for abortion: rape, incest, and me. And if my girlfriend, my daughter, my wife needs an abortion, we will figure out a way to get it for them.
Well, at Oklahoma, rape and incest are not exceptions. And that's a real problem. And that's where I'm at, where, I grew up Catholic. My family was always pro-choice, but they were very much like, but if something happens to you, we had a different support system. And in our family, that we were very pro-life. If you find yourself pregnant, we will help, whatever. But you have to recognize that our situation isn't the next person's. And so that's where I've sort of come up with this upbringing of, I respect life. If, I would want to support a teenager, I would, whatever, but I can't make that choice for someone else. And, the idea of rape and incest, I mean, I can't imagine. We have such a high degree right now of, assaults on women, particularly in the indigenous community. I mean, we have entire movements around sexual assault of Native American women. We have a high population of Native American women in Oklahoma. So, these issues aren't theoretical, they're real. And I remember one time I was at a fundraiser where there were a lot of OBGYNs there. And it was a fundraiser for a pregnancy prevention type of programs. And they were sharing stories of treating 11-year-olds. 11-year-olds, if they're pregnant, they are victims. You cannot consent. And they were talking about how it was traumatizing to these doctors to treat them because it ruined their bodies. It ruined these children's bodies to do that. This happens in Oklahoma. So it's not theoretical. And that's what really bothers me is without having those exceptions. And I do know women who have had abortions. Half of them are because they were in bad medical situations, right. Ectopic pregnancies, babies whose brain did not have, their brains weren't forming, lungs outside their bodies. It was a non-viable birth. And so they didn't want to have it. And so they're, in some cases, maybe their health wasn't at risk, but they're not having a child that's going to live.
And so, even if you have the exception, the life of the mother, which apparently is now the one we're all going to say, well, at least we have that. What does that mean?
Exactly.
If a woman comes in with an ectopic pregnancy, if a woman comes in with an ectopic pregnancy, is her life at stake at that moment? No. So when can she have this abortion? When the tube bursts? When she is going to have her life threatened? Or when does the doctor make the decision this is going to happen? This pregnancy is not viable. We need to get rid of this now. And yes, rid of this now because it is killing you.
Right.
Or do we wait? Or does the doctor say, I'm not comfortable doing this now because I don't want to lose my license? And the hospital says, we're not going to do the first sign of an ectopic pregnancy.
Well, you talked about the doctor deciding. I'm questioning, and I have nothing basis on, are doctors going to be in control? Because right now they're in hospitals where attorneys are giving them the advice. And the attorneys are going to protect the hospital. They're going to protect the, all the certifications that go with that. And so, and what you talk about ectopic pregnancy, I know 2 women that have had them, they were horrifying. Both of them had to have an abortion. They try not to use that word, but that's what it was.
Right.
But there was a Missouri lawmaker who wrote a bill basically saying, you couldn't give an abortion in ectopic pregnancies because you could move that fetus into the womb as if it were Velcro. One of the debates in this debate, I'm starting to realize how little people understand how women's bodies work.
How much they don't care. Let's how much they don't care about.
No, I think I think that they don't know, and it maybe they don't know because they don't care, or maybe they've never had a good sex ed program or whatever it is. But the jokes were like, okay, is it like tape? You take this fetus and put it. We're not Legos. You can't construct where this goes, and so there's a little bit of that going on as well. And so, but the Texas vote, I want to get to the Texas vote Kansas vote. So the Kansas vote was interesting. I did not call that one. I thought Kansas is very much politically like Oklahoma, but the vote was to preserve the right. That the petition was their laws was similar to others where it was a legal option. I think there were some exemptions or some restrictions, but people largely were okay with it. So the petition was to ban it outright. Do you want to keep the current laws or ban it outright? And I really thought that the vote was going to be ban it outright, just like Oklahoma, just like Texas, it's Midwest. And I was shocked that the voters overwhelmingly voted to keep the right.
Keep the protection.
And so everyone got excited and thinks that we can replicate it here.
And we might be able to. What Kansas said to me was that this is an issue that is important to people on the other side who disagree with us on everything else, that there are women out there. Women, Republican women, have vaginas, and they don't want politicians and lawyers telling them what they can do with them. And that was very heartening. And
I don't know the breakdown by gender. I know that when I looked at the Pew Research Center that broke Oklahoma's views down by everything from faith to politics, political leanings to gender. It was pretty split. The only difference on, when and they were asking pro-life, pro-choice, it was when it came to faith. People who identified more as Christians who pray regularly, go to church, they were more against abortion, but it was split up until that point. But the Kansas approach, when I started really reading into it and looking into it, it was a campaign. It was this wasn't like, women got together and we're going to go to the polls. It was very much a thoughtful, worked out campaign that the Kansas City Star had, and it was couched in terms of the campaign. I think it was they called it like the Kansas Constitutional Freedom Campaign. They had couched it in terms of it's government overreach to force a woman to carry a child. And that message resonated with rural Kansans. It resonated with people who were tired of the government saying what to do. And instead of this theological argument or this, any of these other moral type things, it was about the Constitution guarantees you to have a right. To take that away is government overreach. And they raised about $10 million to run that campaign. Now, the other the campaign that tried to ban it outright was called Value Them Both. And it raised a little less than that, like $8 million. And quite a bit of that came from the Catholic Church organizations, different entities in Kansas, around Kansas. And so I wonder I don't know how that would play out in Oklahoma. Because first of all, like we said earlier, we would be asking to put a right back in place. And that's
we have to go back to where we were.
Right. And so people right now, they haven't seen a difference, right? Like the trigger law went into place, and for most people, life went on as normal. So you have to convince people why you need that right back when life as they see it hasn't changed.
And maybe you say that by, again, it's the government overreach, right? Get government out of our lives and back in the bedroom where it belongs. At some point you say, this is not what I want. If you sit in an office with your doctor and your doctor is actually talking to you and listening, there is a moment where you think this is the way it is supposed to be. And the doctor says to me, topic pregnancy, it's not going to survive. It's going to cause you, let's take care of this now. And no matter what political party you are, no matter what religious bent you have at that moment, the idea of your doctor saying, well, hold on a second, let me go check with legal to see if what I just told you can actually happen. Now, that's not just a liberal desire. And I think at that point, many people in Kansas, especially many women in Kansas, have said, I want that right. Going back, though, if you say you're going to have an exception for any exception, right? Even if you just have this cockamamie exception for the life of the mother, which nobody can really define, you are now making a choice that the mother's welfare is more important than the unborn fetus. And I would agree, you should do that. But once you're making that choice, there's your choice. Intellectually, if you're going to be intellectually honest here, then the governor should get on and say, absolutely no exceptions, and point to women and say, yes, you too will go to jail for murder. But
right, and there are people arguing for that. There are some people arguing for that.
But not the governor. Why? Because he's a politician. Even they have a tripwire where they say, we're not going to say this. They're going to blame the doctor. So you're going to throw the doctor in jail for an abortion and not the mother? That is just spineless.
Well,
it's also cruel.
Well, and you talk about, if you think about it, if you believe it's murder, then you would throw the mother in jail, right? If you really believe that, but you're right, no one's going there. But there are some people in this public sphere arguing for just that. If you throw a few moms in prison, then they'll get the message.
But they're not winning elections. Those people not.
No, they are not. But don't think they don't have influence. But I think that what we hear, and this is what I kind of go back to, when you look at the numbers and the polling and the data and just our everyday lives, more people that drowns out all the other voices, that drowns out that 60% we're talking about, that 51 to 60%, right? Or more. So to me, we have to figure out, like, if Oklahoma were to change that, if we were to have a Kansas type vote, we have to make space to be pro-choice and pro-life, that you can be pro-life and it's okay to still say, you know what, but I still want some choices for other people. That we have for 50 years let a Christian right political agenda make this a litmus test, that to be a Republican, you have to be pro-life. So people who like the Republican ticket, for the most part, whether pro-life, whether life was their issue or not, they came to say, yeah, I'm pro-life. So we've got in behind this.
Well, they
that
didn't
took
just
away all this nuance.
They didn't just say it. I mean, name for me, there are pro-life Democrats out there. Name for me the pro-choice Republicans out there, especially in Oklahoma.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, is that there are Republicans, though, that'll say, well, I'm pro-life, except for these 3 or 4 things, these exceptions to these 4 things. So to me, well, you're not completely pro-life. You see that there's a line that can be moved. So there has to be a way for a campaign to say, it's okay to do that. We agree with you. That's the common ground that we can find with you right now. So let's work with that. Let's at least get that right back in place. So you can be pro-life, you can still protect children, but then you're still recognizing the nuance here, that there are women who, are raped, that they, have been victims, at least as a right. Now, granted, I'm in the position of, I don't feel like I should tell anyone else what to do.
Right.
But that's where that common ground has to start somewhere, right?
But look,
Oklahoma let that boat sail.
Well,
we
look
took
where
it
the
right
moment,
away.
But look where the common ground is. That's terrible common ground. So now that's the fallback position. Just give us rape, incest, life of the mother. That's
I think
a compromise.
Well, where do you start, Barry? But where do you start? Where do you
vote these people out?
Pro-life,
you vote them out is where you start.
Well, I think for the extremists, we've let that litmus test happen. We've let it go too long. That we have to create areas to let people be both. I mean, why do you have to be one or the other? Why is it black or white? Why can we not recognize all of these nuances, all of these challenges, all of these reasons that we know women are getting abortions? But we have forced people into choosing a side.
I think those people enjoy being on that side. I don't think anybody is forced into being pro-life and forced into saying no exceptions. I think they enjoy being on that position. And I think the left tries to run around trying to find this common ground where maybe we can find some sanity and humanity in people who will say no exceptions, except maybe the life of the mother. And we say, okay, give us that, give us anything. We're starving for anything. Crumbs, whatever you got, we'll take. And I don't think it's just a messaging problem. But I think the problem is there are enough women out there, and women have to motivate this discussion, because come
on, Barry, tell me what women need to do.
No. I mean, you know this, right? I mean, men. I mean, Alan Spector, right? No liberal said, I don't even know why men are talking about this. I mean, I'm not mansplaining.
But here's why, and I've had people because I've run op-eds written by men on this issue, and I've had people say, why are you doing that? I go, who's in power? Who has been setting the laws for so long? It's not women. It's been largely white men who have set these laws. They're in from Congress to the Supreme Court to our state legislature. I mean, I wish that women were running everything, but we got 20% of the legislature at most. So we have to engage with them.
Women did move the Kansas vote. Yes?
I haven't seen data on that, but I can't imagine it doesn't, because when I look at who's I mean, that coalition, and it was a small coalition that they were very strategic, but they were largely women leaders. But I'll tell you, in Oklahoma, when you look at campaigns, statewide campaigns, they can't be led by the liberal women that we know. Because
how many do you know? I know 3. How many do you know?
I know 5. So I know all of it. But you know what I mean? Like, there have to be women who are in that middle, who are in the rural areas, who see at the front lines what's happening, to stand up and tell their communities, you know, we have to have this. We have people hurting in our communities, in our small towns, without choices. Our poverty is getting worse. Our teen rate's getting, and our teen rate in the state right now is number 4 in the nation. So we're not good on this. But it's not just teens. These are women all the way up, you know, the spectrum. And so when I look at what Kansas did, I mean, they went old school campaign. They took a very tight coalition. Mm-hmm. They identified some key leaders who had influence in these different areas, and they knocked doors. They called. They were at forums. They engaged, and they got a lot of voters out. They had more people show up for that election than they did the 2018 general election. Mm-hmm. So people were motivated by this.
And it's heartening. And it did set the Republican back on their heels a little. And it did scare voters into thinking that this is not just about taxes and not just about regulation, and not just about school loans or whatever it was about. This is about some fundamental issues about who has a right to my body other than me and my doctor.
Right. I cannot think, and as a woman who's gone through childbirth, I am bothered by the diminishing of what that is. Well, just adopt them out.
Right.
I mean, I had a cousin that almost died on her like 4th kid. I've had my health never recovered. I know women, I mean, this is not having a tooth pulled. I mean, it changes a woman's physiology sometimes.
And I would think
it's not something to be taken lightly. And for the government to say, I have to go through that it's troublesome.
Or some extreme politician or party spokesman to tell you that you should be pleased, blessed, and thank whomever that you are in a position to be a vessel for this baby that you're going to give up. Now, there are women on both sides of the political spectrum who
right.
don't
I
want
know
to be
a lot of women who inherently disagree with me in my church, who would say who probably wouldn't be a friend with me, but we just fundamentally, I mean, I feel like you can still be a devout Christian who treasures life and wants to support that, but also recognize as an American, there's a lot of different people out there who aren't of my faith, don't have my support system, don't have whatever it is I have, my privileges, and have choices. So we have to make that clear. And I don't think that we have the men who have been in power for so long have created this yes or no. I mean, because then sometimes people just shut down once you hear that. And that's going to be, if Oklahoma is going to follow suit, that's going to be the challenge. Because so many people, once you say yes or no, they make a judgment on you completely. And that's going to be a very hard thing to turn around.
Yeah, I think maybe the abortion issue now is one of those issues that they're saying to people, I can no longer ignore this as part of my party DNA. I mean, right. Guns and prayer and books and regulation and foreign policy and judges. Okay, I'm with them, or I'm not with them on all those things, but I'm not going to not vote for Republicans because I wish they had a stronger position on guns. I think abortion now, there are some Republicans who are saying, that's it. I can no longer contextualize this because of of this other thing. I mean, Adam Kinzinger, right, today, he was talking about the Trump business with the National Archive documents. And he said, I think he said something about that, but I think many Republicans may someday say about abortion, I don't care what our position is on taxes, this is no longer my party. And I think maybe abortion, we're getting to a point where there are people, Republicans, who believe they're up and down the line, are saying at this moment, I don't care what they say about guns, what they say about prayer. This is my body. This is my daughter's body. This is my wife's body. No more.
I think we're so new into this post-Roe world that we haven't seen the real damage play out yet.
I agree.
Because when I went back and I even interviewed the reporter who did a lot of work before Roe was put into place and what life was like in Tulsa, she did a series on following women who had gotten illegal abortions in Tulsa and what that was like. And we haven't really seen some of those horror stories play out. They're almost myths right now that women, I was stunned when, and she said, yeah, it really happened. Women would be blindfolded, like a stranger would come to their house or they would meet at a parking lot late at night. They would be blindfolded, put in a car, taken to some house where they remained blindfolded through, and I mean, being disrobed, all of that, and then blindfolded and taken home. That's what life was like. Now, whether it returns to that, I hope not, because I think we have a much more mobile society where people are just going to get in a car and drive to Kansas right now. But some of these stories of 10-year-olds having to give birth, of, rape and incest, some of these things, women dying because they couldn't access an abortion when they needed it because their pregnancies were going so wrong. So I don't know when what you're saying will actually come to pass, because right now I think a lot of people are still in the I'm pro-life in all cases, or they're not saying it at all. They're saying I'm pro-life.
Will Oklahoma allow women to travel to a place to get an abortion? There were some laws. I think people will try
to stop it, but I don't know how you can. Well, even in Missouri now that you've got lawmakers wanting to somehow stop the internet. I don't know what they're trying to do, but you can't advertise in Missouri, hey, go to Illinois or wherever. And I'm like, how do you stop that in this society? Everyone has Google. It's the idea that we're going to keep information from people is just dumb. It's sort of like people fighting sex ed programs or people fighting, how to get contraception. It's like, we have information at our fingertips. It'd be nice to get accurate information to people on that. So,
Governor Stitt said, other states can do what they want, but we believe in the sanctity of life here. Do you really believe that he wants to stop here in Oklahoma? Is his job done with abortion now that Oklahoma has outlawed it? Does anybody really believe that's his end game?
Well, it's not just him. I mean,
not just him.
We've got an entire congressional delegation that has always voted for life issues, and they voted against the Protection of Contraception Act. Because now keep in mind that Justice Thomas specifically said when they threw out Roe that we ought to relook at contraception. Same-sex marriage, he left out interracial marriage, which falls into that.
He left out Loving versus Virginia, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That one might affect him.
And so when those came up, when Congress did take that as a cue and say, hey, we're going to come up with, so, the governor's not the only one here. We have an entire legislature who put these in place. The governor, he can't act alone. He had legislation to approve. And that came from our state house and our state senate. So all of our elected leaders at the Capitol, look them up. I mean, that's where, I was, yes, because, and he did exactly what he said he would do on the campaign trail. He said, I will sign every piece of pro-life legislation that comes across his desk. And he did. That came from the Capitol. It came from our legislature. So they're in this too. So how do you, but going back to where Oklahoma is, to get where you're talking about, because you think there's no common ground, how do you turn that around? Because I don't see that avenue yet.
Well, if I saw it I would tell you, there is, I think at some level, everybody wants to control his or her body.
I agree. I mean, to me, the government overreach certainly resonates with me, because I mean, you know, even when you take guns, like I don't like guns, I don't own one, but I'm fine with having the right to have one, you know, so you can be against something inherently and still want the choice out there, still have the right out there for others.
Remember the first defensive bumper sticker you ever saw for the pro-choice people? 20, 30 years ago, I saw this bumper sticker that said, against abortion, don't have one. And I thought, it's defensive and it's kind of petty, but start there.
That's sort of how that was sort of how, you know, and like I say, I grew up Catholic, and this is always kind of a sticky subject there, because the leadership of the Catholic Church has moved in my lifetime so much into the space where it's like become the defined. I mean, like say the Catholic Church in Kansas, you know, kicked in millions of dollars on, you know, entities. But, you know, there was John F. Kennedy who famously said, I don't take my governance from the Pope, because he was, you know, because it was the first Catholic Pope, and everyone thought, okay, we're going to be having to all be Catholic now. And he's like, no, I can have my faith and exercise it and still be an American and defend the rights of others. Right. And I think not just the Catholic Church, but so many churches have blurred that lines. And that's dangerous. It's dangerous for faith. It's definitely dangerous for democracy. And, you know, Bob Doucette, the editorial writer, wrote quite a bit about this Christian nationalism, you know, thing that's taken over. And it plays into this abortion. And because I think it started with abortion. And certainly over the last 50 years, you know, morphed the two. So have we figured out anything here, Barry?
Well, we know that the word God doesn't show up in the Constitution.
No, does not.
Neither does abortion, and neither does Air Force. So what do we do with that? We dive into it and try to figure out what protection means. But getting back to your central point, how you fight this is, I think, if you talk to people on a personal level, that it's your daughter. It's not just an 11-year-old out there. It's not just some woman who wants to go play tennis and have an abortion. We're talking about your wife, your daughter, your family that has 3 children and can't afford another child. We're talking about your life. And people want to take away your control over your life. There's an issue there. That resonates, I think, with everybody. I think that's how it starts. And you elect people who on some level say, listen, I disagree with him on everything, but this issue is more important to me than taxes or regulation. So I'm going with them on this one. Now, Joy Hofmuster, right? She's much more conservative than I want her to be. Much more conservative than a lot of liberals want her to be. But she's there on these issues that we think define us and define Oklahoma, and send a message out about Oklahoma. That, I think, is important. That's how you do it. I think you keep trying to reach people on a personal level, because that's how the right's been successful. You know, the life of the child, as if the fertilized egg is got on white shoes and white skirt and is already headed to Easter service. Right? Even the language, pro-life. What do we can't be anti-life, we'll do pro-choice. Oh, that sucks. But that was the word left, pro-life. Who can be against pro-life? But as you say, you can be pro-choice and be against abortion. You can be pro-life and accept the need for abortion. I agree with you that there is some common ground there. But until you find a Republican who's will willingly say, I am pro-choice and my party is nuts, you're going to have no progress. And that's when maybe you have to go to people on a personal level. I want to end with one more story.
Okay.
One more story. Picture a 3rd floor of a hospital. All right? There's a fertility clinic and a nursery. And a fire breaks out on the 3rd floor of that hospital. And firefighters come with first responders. Where do they go first? The nursery. Why? Because those babies are alive.
Did you make that up, or did someone tell you that? You're not going to say.
I don't remember. I really don't remember. I've been saying it so long. I don't remember.
Good point. I mean, it is a good point. And we could go on and on about this, because there's one of the weaknesses that I have found that we see is that there was so much focus on having the baby that the Republicans largely have ignored everything that comes after.
Barney Frank, life begins at conception and ends at birth.
Yeah. So, you know, what happens, you know, for that mother who has the baby in a struggling 5-10 years from now, when the kid's in public school, are you funding that public school? When the kid, you know, so there's been a weakness in this pro-life movement all along that I think now we're seeing, that you've gutted all of the support programs to help families and women in particular who need that. And so that's a whole other discussion, but, you know, it certainly plays into the reasons. Poverty is pretty high up there. So, the fertilized egg doesn't make any demands on you, right? When babies are born, when parents have children, they start making demands on government. Right.
The fertilized egg doesn't ask for anything.
So we have solved nothing, I think, but we feel better. Are you going to?
I feel terrific.
So the next topic, what's next, Barry? The death penalty. You want to take that one on? I mean, what other? There's really not any other hot topics quite like abortion.
Let's go with God.
Huh?
God.
Oh, God. We need guests for that one. We need to bring the rabbi on.
People who know something about it.
We need some experts, Barry, because this is not our forte.
This is way out of our control, way out of our wheelhouse.
Well, thanks. It's always fun. I hope people, if you get mad at us, write us. That's fine. People get mad at us. If you agree with us, great. But we hope we've given you something to think about, something to, you know, hang on to there. So any last words, Barry?
No, I think we got it. And I may have stolen that line now that I think about it. It's too good.
Either way,
I don't think I would have come up with it. Yeah.
It's a good metaphor analogy. I don't know what the name is. So anyway, till next week, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.